Number 1. A cold winter night. With being how hot it has been for us in the US over the past few months, I thought I would tell a story of something that happened to me in the wintertime. Maybe it will help us all cool off a little bit. I used to be a manager of a fast food restaurant in northern Illinois. Even though the winters there can still be pretty bad, they were much worse back then. This was actually my first job as a manager of a place, and I had only been in the position for a couple of months. They had me in a really small store that didn't normally get a whole lot of business, so I was very often closing the store down at night, and being the only manager there who was doing it. We were expecting the first really big snow of the season on this day. The first big snow in the area is always anticipated, and the roads pretty much die after people go out and just buy whatever they think they are going to need. So we had a little bit of a busy rush during the afternoon, but by the time somewhere around 3:30 p.m., we were deader than a really large graveyard. The snow began falling shortly after, and although it was light at first, it didn't take very long before the snow was coming down very heavily. And as the sun went down, we stopped getting any customers at all. I had to let some of my employees go home because we simply were not making any sales, and it was pointless to keep them there. It was almost as pointless as trying to keep the place open. But I didn't have any control over that, really. I eventually took over doing the cash register and the drive-thru all by myself, having one person making all the food. The point being that there were only 2 of us left in the place. A few hours went by, and I was really looking forward to this night ending, but also dreading the drive home that was awaiting me. And that was when 2 young people came into the store. It was a guy and a girl, and they both looked like they were around 18, if not even younger than that. While the boy went to the bathroom or something, the girl came up to the counter to talk to me. She was telling me that she and the guy had missed their bus, and they were from out of state. They didn't have any money and were wondering if there was a homeless shelter or anywhere that I knew of that they could stay for the night. I admitted that although I worked there, I didn't live in the town that my store was in. I really had no idea if there was a shelter or not, but I told them if they really needed to, I had no problem with them hanging out in the restaurant until we closed. I'd also be happy to give them a little free food if they wanted. We had to keep burgers on the grill and fries in the fry warmer all the time, and all that food would just be going in the trash anyway, because we weren't getting anyone coming into the place. I told them that I hoped that would help them out just a little bit. Oh, they were thankful for the help, although I felt bad that I couldn't do more for them. I mean, I had been homeless in a city that I was unfamiliar with before in my life, so I knew how scary it could be. I almost considered offering them to come back to my apartment with me, so they wouldn't have to fight against the elements. I mean, I knew that even if there was a homeless shelter in the town, they wouldn't still be accepting people into the shelter that late. While they were eating, my other employee went out to talk to them for a bit. I just sort of kept things going and trying to decide what I might have wanted to do. Part of me really felt that since few people showed me such kindness when I was in their position, it would be really nice to show them some. Having to be outside all night in a snow shower like we were having would have been horrible and might have even killed them. Before I had a chance to make up my mind about anything, though, I heard my employee come back into the employee area. He told me that he had called up a friend of his that he lived with. It was actually a guy who had worked in the restaurant before too, and they decided that they were going to let the 2 people sleep over at their place. Well, I was a bit relieved, but I also felt a little bad for being relieved. It was like I was feeling good that I really didn't have to help. But he also went to grab a clean rag and wetted it down. I asked what that was for, and he told me that the guy had a really nasty cut on the palm of his hand. He figured he had slipped and hit it on something during the snowstorm that was still going on. When the store closed, I let the employee leave while I did all the closing up. It was kind of nice being in the store by myself like that, with all the snow falling outside. After I had just about everything done, I went to the restroom before it was time to drive home. It was going to be a long drive in this weather. The mirror and the stall door were streaked with blood, and it was like someone took their bleeding palm of their hand and just wiped his blood all over the place. And it was fresh enough that it couldn't have been anyone but the guy who had just gone home with one of my employees. Disturbed, I went over to the office and looked up his contact information on his application. Although he had a phone number on it, I tried to call it, and the number had been disconnected. There was an address, but I had no idea where it was. We didn't have an internet connection at the store, and this was ages before Wi-Fi and smartphones, so I had no idea how to find it. But I was deeply worried. The only thing I could do was call the police, and it took them forever to get over there. I showed them the bathroom, explained what happened, and gave them the address. Then after that they left, and I just spent the time being worried. So I was dying to find out what had happened. I was so worried that something had happened to my employee, and I didn't find out until the next day when he was at work. Apparently, though, I didn't have anything to worry about. They never even got to my employee's house. Apparently the guy and the girl were acting very, very bizarre in the car, and they asked my employee if he wanted any PCP. He immediately kicked them both out of his car. I felt great that he had offered to take them instead of me. I have to admit that I can be a bit mild-mannered, and I might not have been as brave as to kick them out. Mostly I was just happy he was okay. Number 2. A cold walk. A few years ago, I got transplanted from a really cold climate to a really hot one. I was used to winters with snowstorms that produced several feet worth of snow, while not shutting down any schools or businesses. I now live in one where if the ground frosts, everything shuts down. No one can drive, and there's a panic where everybody buys out all the bread, milk, and toilet paper from all the local stores. So about the second winter that I lived there, something really interesting happened that hasn't happened since. We were set to have a really nasty snowstorm, and as expected, it was a really crazy and hectic during the day, as the snowstorm was supposed to hit that night. And when the storm hit, it didn't disappoint. It was a hard falling snow which quickly began sticking and building up on the ground. Of course, by that point, the town had become a ghost town, but I really didn't care. I wasn't planning on going out into the storm, just was going to enjoy it from home. The worst part, and I guess I should have expected it to happen, was when the power went down. And after that I knew it was going to be a while before the power came back on. So I really didn't have much to entertain myself with. I did decide that I would go and take a walk and see how extensive the power outage was. I still had all my belongings from when I lived in a colder climate, so I had my boots and a coat and hats. So I would be able to get around easily and keep as warm as I needed to be. I wasn't about to drive because the roads were not salted, and it didn't seem like any plows were out working quite yet. So I walked around in my neighborhood, and it looked like everything was out. It was so dark outside too because all the street lamps were out too. There was absolutely no one outside other than me, which was exactly what I had expected. I would have absolutely nothing to do if I went back home. So I decided it wouldn't hurt me to walk into town and see how things were going down there. I figured there was a better chance that some of the lights and such would be on down there. There is a bridge that you have to go over to get into town. It's over a train tunnel, and I found out before that a lot of homeless people tend to live under the bridge, because it is the coolest place in the summertime, and the only place that they can be protected from the elements. I had never seen any homeless people in the town though, so up until that point, I didn't know if that was true or not. When I was approaching the bridge on the left side of it, I thought I noticed someone walking up the hill on the other side. As dark as it was, I couldn't be sure of it at first. But as I got closer to the bridge, there was definitely someone who was walking on the opposite side of the bridge of me. Now, it is not always scary to see someone walking at night, as we often think it would be. Actually, I get more scared walking around and never seeing anyone. Whenever I do see someone, I generally feel a sense of relief that I am not alone anymore. For some reason, though, That was not what I was feeling at that moment. I was actually feeling a little nervous, but at least he was on the other side of the bridge, and I felt there was really no reason to be nervous as long as he was. After I got to the other end of the bridge, I was able to see into town, and when I did, I noticed that it was dark in the town too. There were a few stores that looked like they had lights on, probably from generators. I should have just let my curiosity be filled at that point, and turned and gone on my way back home, but I began thinking about the possibly homeless guy across the road. I was wearing a pretty heavy coat, and it was pretty likely he didn't have anything like that at all to keep him warm, and I decided that I would try and do a good thing, and cross over the street and offer him my coat. So I started crossing the street, which was a little difficult because it was more slippery than the sidewalks were. I did almost slip and fall a couple times, but I did manage to hold myself up. When I got up to the guy, he obviously noticed me. I asked him if he needed a coat to try and keep himself warm. When he turned and looked at me, I finally got a really good look at the guy. He was torn up badly. He had several cuts on his face. He was holding his right arm as if it were broken, and he just looked absolutely horrible. "Get the fuck back here!" I heard a third person yell from behind us. Turning, I saw another guy walking toward us. It only took a moment for me to put two and two together and realize that the new guy must have been the guy who caused all these injuries. The injured guy tried to move off, and for the first time I noticed that he had a limp about him. The new guy tried to push past me, and I noticed that he had a knife on him, and it was all very overwhelming. "How dare you try to fucking take my blanket?" The new guy screamed after the first guy. "I didn't," the injured guy wailed and tried to get away. I was shocked, but knew I had to help the guy or he might get killed. So I moved close to the new guy and I pushed him as hard as I could. It was snowy and slippery out, like I had mentioned, and the guy fell hard, and then he hit and slid down the hill. I took out my smartphone and I called 911 immediately. The guy had a lot of trouble getting back up and wasn't able to before the police eventually arrived. By that point I had already given the injured guy my coat, and they had gotten an ambulance for him. The attacker got arrested too. Both guys were homeless guys who lived under the bridge. I really have no idea what might have happened, but apparently the guy who got arrested had caused problems with other homeless people too. I am very glad I took the walk that night, which I wouldn't have done if the power hadn't gone out. If I hadn't, who knows if the first guy would even be alive. Number 3. On a hot day. I had a really strange experience once when I was working at Wendy's as a supervisor. This happened during a lunch rush on a weekend one day. I remember it pretty well because it was taking place on a pretty hot summer day. So we had air conditioning and our Wendy's was in a pretty poor area. So we were packed and selling a whole lot of cold drinks and Frosties on that day. I was running the floor, which meant I had to keep an eye on all aspects of the food service and cashiering. So I had to be paying attention to a lot of things at one time. I don't know if that means I was more or less likely to notice what I had noticed. These two teenage boys came into the restaurant. There was really nothing remarkable about them. I honestly can barely even remember what they even looked like. But what got me paying attention to them was the way that they were acting. First off, they looked very, very nervous. Not only that, but they were way overdressed for how hot it was outside. They were both wearing jackets, and the heat index had to be about 100 degrees out there. When they came into the place, they didn't go to the bathroom or get in line right away. Instead, they started wandering around the dining room, just looking very, very nervous. I kept an eye on them, watching them eventually get into the line, or serpentine, as I remember it was called. But when they got about halfway through the line, they actually went under the railing, and they actually left the store. So I decided that whatever they were up to, maybe they were just indecisive about what they were going to get. The lunch rush went on, and about 30 minutes after they left, I noticed that they came back into the restaurant. They acted nearly exactly like they had before. I really didn't know what to think about those two, but something was really just rubbing me the wrong way, and I have always felt that it is absolutely better to be always safe than sorry. The police station was literally across the street from the restaurant. The cops were always in there for food, and they always got it for free, so I had every reason to believe that they wouldn't be mad at me if I called them over, and it ended up being for nothing. So I left the front counter for a minute, called over and explained to them what was going on. They actually told me that it sounded like I was right to be concerned, and they would be right over. I went back up to the front as quickly as possible to see how things were going to play out. Although they didn't use lights or sirens, 2 police cars immediately drove up and into the parking lot of the Wendy's. The first thing that I noticed was a panic from the 2 boys. They immediately rushed over to the garbage cans and threw something into the garbage. Then, while the police were coming in one door, they tried to rush their way out of the door on the opposite side of the store. Things got a little chaotic for a few moments there. Of course, all the attention on everyone in the store switched over to the cops and the 2 boys trying to get out. I guess one of the cops had seen the boys throw something into the garbage, so one of the cops went over to check out the garbage cans. They were also quickly able to get over to the boys and bring them back into the foyer. After going through the garbage cans, the cops signaled for me to come over to the employee doorway. I did, but I glanced back as I saw the other 2 cops putting the 2 boys under arrest. I opened up the employee door and let the one cop in, and what he showed me made me absolutely happy that I was so suspicious. They were 2 handguns, so apparently the 2 guys were planning on an armed robbery of the store. I'm guessing that they had never done anything like that before, which could explain why they seemed so nervous. It turned out they were just BB guns, but it was still an attempted armed robbery, and I watched as the police handcuffed them and put them in their cars. I was glad I called. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to click the subscribe button and bell below, or click the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment, and share this video with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please email it to the address included in the description. But most importantly, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.